You may remember former ABC reporter Terry Moran. He was the one fired by the network shortly after making a social media post where he said, among other things, that senior Trump advisor Stephen Miller was, quote, richly endowed with the capacity for hatred. Well, he's now admitting the networks are, in fact, biased. Moran wrote on Substack, quote, I worked at ABC News for almost 28 years. I'm proud to say that. A lot of good people do a lot of really good work there, and they try hard to get the story right. But were we biased? Yes, almost inadvertently, I'd say. Moran writes, saying that the bias from mainstream media is not malevolent in nature, stems instead from a lack of viewpoint diversity. Quote, there are hardly any people who supported Donald Trump at ABC News or the other networks. This is bound to impact coverage, not so much out of malevolent bias, the cartoon version peddled by Trump, more out of a kind of what is a kind of deafness. He continues, yes, news teams go out with a microphone and a camera and accost people at Trump rallies, but to me that often comes off as weirdly anthropological and inaccurate, kind of like trying to understand nature by visiting a zoo.
This indictment of network media came in the middle of an article by Moran slamming the FCC's approval of the Paramount-Skydance merger, or more specifically the demand from the FCC that CBS, owned by Paramount, would need to appoint a bias monitor for their coverage. Or, as Moran put it, the Trump FCC demanded an in-house stooge at the news division to alert the corporate bosses when the journalists get out of line and exhibit bias. The federal government has no business dictating the editorial content of news coverage, Moran continued. This isn't Viktor Orban's Hungary, or the Law and Justice Party's Poland, or Putin's Russia in the late 1990s, when free voices critical of the Kremlin could still be heard before he crushed them. He goes on, yes, from my perspective, the old news networks are biased, but Brendan Carr can go to hell. Brendan Carr, we should say, the head of the FCC and the person who's trying to impose these conditions on CBS and Paramount, like the bias monitor, which is a concept that I think Mr. Stalin or Mr. Lenin would be happy with.
Bias monitor is not a phrase I like very much. It's not one I've appreciated when it's been on college campuses, for instance, when they're looking out for incidents of bias, going back to the radar I discussed. Yeah, look, they should be free to be biased, obviously. Trying to weigh and calculate and measure and police bias of this sort in coverage is also a little bit weird because, I mean, then we're just getting to a version of net neutrality where if they have this much pro-Republican, they got to have this much anti-Republican. I would find that ridiculous if applied to Fox News or Newsmax or any other thing. Now, and then it's cable versus, so I know the licenses work differently and that's all, but to me, these are becoming archaic distinctions in an era where the internet and streaming exists. Yeah. Private companies should broadly be allowed to set whatever policies, editorial policies they want. It's not the business of the federal government. And all the times I complained when the Democratic administrations were doing sort of monetary things or jawboning to social media companies I was against, this is just like that. I think they should just let the merger happen and not try to police the aspects of the editorial content.
No, absolutely. And the policing of the editorial content is, I think, quite obviously and flagrantly an attempt by the Trump administration to ensure friendlier coverage of them. To Terry Moran's other point about diversity, I actually think he does have a point in how diversity is defined. And I think it is a legitimate criticism of the left or parts of the left that the word diversity is often used to mean quite a narrow spectrum of diversity.
Right.
And there's certainly I think a segment of what I would consider sort of NPR liberalism, which when they say diversity really means a person with of a different race who agrees with me about everything else. And I think that isn't diversity. Now, I would be in favor.
There's also never Trump diversity,
right,
where they add a Republican,
right, who's
Nicole Wallace,
exactly a fake or former Republican, and that happens, quite a lot, and it's people. Conservative columnist Jennifer Rubin, who has not espoused any conservative belief for years, as far as I can tell. Now, I mean, particularly when it comes to that, what I would like to see is a broader concept of diversity. I have argued for years that class is understated or underappreciated as an important part of diversity. Working class people, regardless of what liberal or conservative ideology they hold, are vastly underrepresented in the media.
Which is not always used to be the case.
Exactly.
It was a working class job, as Batya Ungar-Sargon has written a great book about that.
Yeah, and it used to be much more working class. I think part of the reason that it has ceased to become so is the vast fees that colleges charge. We were just talking about this in yesterday's Rising, where people are $50,000-$60,000 a year tuition fees to have a journalism degree. Neither you nor I know, have an official journalism qualification. It's
a very overrated degree.
It really is.
I mean, there are good journalism schools to be clear, but journalism is, I always say this, is more of a craft than it is an area of study. Obviously, you can study anything, but done by very expert people who've contemplated the philosophical implications of the job or the subject. But it is more writing is something you can be instructed in. You get better just by doing it. The skills you get they're not best taught in a classroom. It's just you shadow a journal. You serve as an intern at a magazine or newspaper or TV studio. You learn how it's done. That's it. That's the education.
Yeah, and it is predominantly learnt by the doing of it rather than the theoretical study of it. And I think that is really important. So I'm in favour of diversity. I'm against the government interfering or appointing bias monitors that they will determine what is bias and what isn't. So I seem to be the Terry Moran of the situation as far as I can tell.
Yeah, because it's not, people's ideologies are more complicated too than just like, a right person, a liberal person. I'm sure left people feel just as underrepresented in mainstream media. That's something Brianna would always talk about. As conservatives do. It's just, like you said, very narrowly permitted range of what constitutes diversity. And then the news opinion distinction is the other elephant in the room, is that it's all, they're not even supposed to be expressing an opinion at all, the straight news reporters, but they all do have their own opinions, which is increasingly just a totally outmoded means of information distribution. We will move to a let your freak flag fly. Let me know your opinion.
I think you're right that we will. I think that is actually quite a difficult thing in this particular moment, because there are still the remnants of the idea of a wall of separation between the two, and then increasingly in newer forms of media that distinction isn't there at all. And if you look at certain networks, like for example, the main cable, well, CNN less so, but Fox and MSNBC, both have this distinction that you're kind of just supposed to understand, that the dayside programming is purportedly less opinion-based and more straight news, and the evening is more opinionated, but those lines can get very fuzzy.
Well, the host is ostensibly kind of doing news, and then just bringing on personalities to discuss and debate. It's an interesting format.
For sure.
Well, we have a lot more to talk about on Rising. Please stay with us.